How you doing? This is Josh. In this video, you'll be seeing segments of the concept show we produced for the Discovery Channel. It was with Cool Fire Studios of St. Louis. The show was basically set to air in 2016, but the plug was pulled in the last moments. We think some of the data we were presenting was a bit too controversial for the timing. In it, John of the United States Special Forces and I were set to tie together sites around the world, weaving a common thread to our obfuscated history. After the clip, I'll continue on where we left off in the Piazza Caves. Please don't be put off by the audio and the Discovery Channel segments. It clears up directly after these shots.
These people are all worshiping serpents, right? I don't know how they're getting these gates.
You're gonna find some shit that people will not be able to go through by foot.
We're talking about some sort of beings, right? Totally took advantage of the cave system, interacting with humanity, giving them technologically advanced information.
They were conquerors through money.
With the advancement of technology and the bullhorn of social media, there are new discoveries every day that blow widely accepted facts and timelines out the window. From lost civilizations to alien intelligence, government conspiracies, the reality of the world we live in is like the X-Files on steroids.
Trust Jesus and repent. I consider myself a Josh of all trades. I'm a professional diver. I work in construction. I'm a tattoo artist.
Josh is definitely like a bottle rocket. You light the fuse, you walk away. You watch at a distance.
I'm just waiting for part of this to freaking just explode. I'm gonna end up looking like a white version of Seal.
He's very passionate, very devoted. He is also a lunatic.
I didn't grow up. I'm kind of like Peter Pan without all the homoeroticism. I don't even like to talk about a lot of this stuff because it makes me look guano crazy. You know what I mean?
Letter by letter, word by word. I am not ignorant enough to not acknowledge my ignorance. In the military, I got escape and evasion training. I got survival training. I scored expert in every firearm and weapon I put in my hand. Let's go break into the Vatican vault.
I would love to do that, bro.
Been in plenty of dangerous situations, and if I get that coppery taste in the back of my throat of adrenaline, I like it.
If for whatever reason you've decided to, stroke his fur the wrong way, I just look at it as it's natural selection. God chose this day for you to die.
There's little in this world that I haven't done, and I'm not scared of anything. You blindly spit Christianity upon every freaking thing that you see. Josh judges his belief system on a book. I think it's a great book, but I own lots of Clancy novels too. I want to find out what it is in tangible reality. Something I can hold in my hand, or just something that makes sense in my head. Not something I read.
We're definitely not interested in coddling some scholar's ego for all the great things he thinks he's discovered.
If you're trying to hide something from me and I need to get at it, I'm going to get at it. I'll go swim to the bottom of a pit. I'll walk through fire.
Laws and fences and all these things, they're just obstacles. And if you can't overcome obstacles, you probably should just move in your mother's basement. It's all the same. How does that happen?
If I can keep you ignorant, I control you. I own you. I would love to be a part of waking the world up. Truth should be hunted ravenously. Come with me now.
We talked about Cahokia, that civilization kind of extending over into St. Louis, which was also known as Mound City. One thing I wanted to kind of point out with these sites, and this is similar to pyramidal sites all over the world, pyramidal sites all over the United States. We know them as mound builders, the mound building civilization. They extend all the way down into what we call Mesoamerica. And then obviously, some of the pyramids we've all heard of in Egypt. Most don't know that there are even larger pyramids, both in the base and in height in China that dwarf the largest pyramids of Giza, and dwarf them by a substantial, like there's pyramids in China that extend over 1,000 feet in height. So I just kind of wanted to tie some of these sites together. What we've learned is very disjointed. I think that's done on purpose. It's kind of compartmentalization even on a historical level. But I think when you start looking at this just as it is with none of these preconceived things kind of going, but if you were just new to this subject and all of a sudden just began looking at a map and realizing that there's pyramids all around the world, you find out that these pyramids are all celestially aligned. They're aligned with different constellations and also different seasons, all represented in the stars. They all have similar writing style and similar religious style or religious beliefs. And coinciding with that, they all show evidence of snake worship, which is pretty interesting. They all have similar amulets and talismans. Once again, this kind of goes back with the religious belief structure. The other tenet that's kind of the same with all these sites is there's always evidence of human sacrifice, also mummification of the human body. Lastly, I wouldn't even say lastly, but another point I wanted to bring up was that under these sites, the cave systems, the tunnel systems, and they're huge on every one. They're even finding now in Egypt that there's vast cave systems that extend out far beyond the Giza Plateau. Some of these structures are written about by Herodotus. I believe Pliny the Elder also. So that's pretty interesting. These sites all contain these similarities. It's preposterous to believe that this just happened like that. This is just the way it is. People just do that. People would just naturally tend towards using unbelievable amounts of manpower and resources to stack up massive mounds or pyramids, celestially aligned, and then dig caves under them. I mean, that's just ridiculous. Who does that? There's a common thread. So even more than that, we have some photos that I could show you from the mound civilization that was here in the Mississippi. These are old pictures, 1800s or even before. They are the foundation stones of what was inside the pyramid itself. The earth has been removed, and this is what was inside of them. And what's pretty interesting is a lot of these pyramids here had springs, natural springs under them. And so the springs actually came up to the top of the pyramid and flowed down. And agriculturally, it's pretty cool. They used like a tier effect to grow different plants. The plants would grow in these tiered kind of terraces down some of these pyramids, and then at the bottom they would actually have like pools, and these pools were mixed with the lime. They would grow maize, and they would put the maize in these pools of lime and use a process called nixtamalization. And this in and of itself is just, who figures this out? It's almost kind of like who figured out how to make ayahuasca, or very specific chemical processes that go into making that. It makes you wonder where this knowledge came from. The knowledge of the stars, all these different things, and then also how this was disseminated all over the earth. These are questions that you should be asking yourself. So yeah, they use the lime, it's a nixtamalization process. This actually turned the maize into a complex protein. It also enabled the body to process more there's calcium and other such elements that were just unable to be taken out naturally. It also extended the shelf life of the maize, which enabled it to be easier traded and moved about without it going bad. So the ability for them to grow maize and then process it like this was huge, and sustaining large populations. Populations that were trading with one another, not just within the Americas, but so once again, this is going to kind of shatter the theories that we've been taught. There's actually maize found in Egypt, and we all know that corn didn't really grow in Egypt. Did it? They're finding maize there, also tobacco and blow cane. So, there's something else to think about. Also, maize, corn, whatever, is also found in China. So The Chinese have record of this in their ancient cultic medicine book. It's kind of like what, you know, one truth can topple a whole mountain of lies. Well, that whole pyramid of lies that they keep building on top of these simple truths, I mean, are enough to just shatter that. So circling back on the cave systems, it's well known that St. Louis has a huge cave systems under it. The whole city's basically hollow. If I can go into some things kind of just a little bit, I guess. On the river here, there was the old National Archives, and it goes down super deep. There's a bunch of patents that were housed in there. Patents like the nuclear patents that were taken from Nazi Germany by the Jewish irregulars. That's another pretty cool story. They took over a Nazi nuclear base without one shot being fired. It was all a PSYOP program. You know, it was Sigmar Aldrich after they purchased it. The Israelis from the National Archive, Sigmar Aldrich was here once again utilizing these deep underground cavern structures that already existed from ancient times. Major cities are all on top, perched on top of these huge cave systems. New York City, Seattle, Portland. You can go into it, look into it yourself. It's there. So we have Sigmar Aldrich here, and then right next to that, we have the National Geospatial Agency, which is basically an intelligence agency, a spy agency. Most people haven't heard about it. You know, they hear about the CIA and the NSA and the DIA and the DOD and all these kind of alphabets, but NGA I think just kind of came out in the open with the Bin Laden, the whole Bin Laden fiasco. At the same time, SEAL Team 6 kind of came out in the forefront, even though a lot of people knew about them anyway. But Sigmar Aldrich is actually sold to the Germans. The Germans have it now. They're right down here, and they're called Sigma Millipore now. And if you want, you can go ahead and buy glow-in-the-dark rats and see-through mice and all sorts of other cloned and genetically altered goodies. Of course, you're going to have your own well-financed lab and all that to get your hands on any of it. Pretty interesting how things kind of seem to go full circle with the monsters over in Piazza, and we got new monsters being made right here today. So I don't want to go too much into exactly what's going on here in the river, but needless to say, there's more going on under your feet when you're down here than you could even ever imagine. You know, this is a sanctuary city. There's a couple of large sanctuaries here, and you don't necessarily get to them above ground either. A lot of people get there from under the ground, and one of the ways is pretty crazy. It has to do with the Mississippi River. That's all I'm going to say about that for now. So the military might of the ancients is basically the same military might of the modern day here, and it's all underground. If you try to get in any of these caves without proper permits, you can get fined and imprisoned. The city began making people seal these cave entrances up. You wouldn't be granted a occupancy permit to live in your home until these cave entrances are sealed. So no access. They don't want anyone in there, and it's a crime to do so. There's still entrances. They're closely guarded by different gatekeepers around the city. The caves are used on one level for grottos. They're called grottos. There's a few very powerful grottos here. Not a lot of people know about either, but you know, people call it Satanism and all that kind of stuff. I think that's kind of, ultimately, maybe when it comes down to it, it is the worship of a darker force. But that stuff's going on here. They use these caves for ritual purposes. It keeps the rituals secret, and also some of the sick stuff they do down there. But there was a girl, this was about 20 years ago. She was about 15 years old. She was abducted, kidnapped here in St. Louis. They abducted her in a white van, right? So that rapist van thing, man, probably more truth to that little saying than you even think. Abducted. So anyway, she was drugged, and she kind of lost track of time for a while. I think it ended up being a few days. She was actually missing. But she kind of came out of her haze, and she ended up escaping. Once again, I got to be careful with my details. She ended up escaping and running down. She said what seemed to be a like dark, muddy, cave. That's what she describes it as. She ended up making her way up a ladder and a staircase, and ended up coming into a building, and then running through the building, escaping through the building. And she found herself on the river in downtown St. Louis, coming out of one of these buildings down here. And from there, she was found. Police were called, and she was returned to her home. She suffered PTSD to such great extent that it's really ruined her life in many ways. Relationships. She's married. Her marriage is super strained by this. And still to this day. So my heart goes out to anyone that survived some ordeals like this. It's very real, and it's happening. And so anyway, I have more to say about that. I come out of that background. I don't really want to go into it too much right now, but we're going to touch on that more in later videos. So when I was in Belize, I met with some grave robbers, and it's a long story. I don't really need to get into it much, but I was able to see some really cool artifacts. A lot of stuff that we'll never see the light of day as far as museums or whatever. They'll go to a private collection, probably in Germany somewhere. But I can show you a couple pictures that I was able to take. One is these axe heads. Now these axe heads are made of jadeite. Jadeite is about a, I believe a 7.5 or 8 on this hardness scale index. Diamonds at about a 10. So these are super hard, super dense, almost like metal. It feels like metal when you put it to your cheek. Even if it's hot in the jungle, you put these to your cheek and they're still cold. It's pretty interesting. So yeah, these axe heads, if you look, they're similar. They're the same kind of axe heads that we find around here. Even in the museum here at Cahokia, I've got some images of the axe heads in there. You can check them out. This similarity in axe heads and ceremonial stuff is just, you can't dismiss it as being completely separated cultures. Not only separated by thousands of miles, but separated by centuries. And so this is preposterous. There's a lot of seashell amulets, seashell jewelry. In Belize, also, we are digging in an undisclosed site. It's about a 3-day hike out in the middle of the jungle. It's closer to Guatemala. This site was pretty interesting in that all these sites, once again, are buried under meters of soil. And it's not soil. This earth becomes super compact. Some areas it almost is like, it's a sedimentary stone almost, but these areas it was like dirt. It was so compact. It was like a brittle, almost concrete. It was super hard. But we were finding seashells in these layers. So these sites were buried with this sediment, and when this sediment buried them, this wasn't just rain and stuff and wind and whatever, and they say all this cosmic dust, adds hundreds of tons of debris to our soil every year and blah, blah, blah. You can't get 3, 10, whatever, 15 meters of this stuff. And then as you dig down through it, this is way inland too. We're talking about in the jungle here. There's tons of seashells in there. How does that happen unless there's seawater on top of it? I mean, you gotta just use your head. I think when we're looking at this stuff, we're looking at like sites even here. They're buried by 15 or so meters. The average depth that an old archaeologist said here was anywhere from 10 to 15 meters was an average depth. And when they began finding a lot of the really base layer of where they believed these civilizations were, this city is rife with human skeletal remains that they found all throughout the development of the city. Now the city has a weird law. When they're digging and they come across skeletal remains, especially ancient skeletal remains, there's the way the law is being translated here is that they don't need to alert any archaeological societies or archaeological institutions at all. They're only supposed to really notify law enforcement agencies, the police or whatever. So that makes it pretty easy, especially when the police are just kind of like, It looks ancient. Let's keep digging, you know. Especially when we're in St. Louis here and we've got about an 80-85% chance of not figuring out who may have killed somebody here. So you know how the saying goes, if you want to kill somebody, take them to St. Louis. So that's how that works. The strange thing that's happening now is it's this soft disclosures going on to where the information's out there. If you want to know, you can know. I think a lot of people are just waiting for like CNN or say it and have somebody official come on and say it and be like, this is official. You know, oh, it's official now, because until it's official, you know, there's all these news sites and that could be fake news. And there's a lot of fake news going around too. The waters are really muddy. I think what's important is to look at who's saying what and what they're saying and vet it out. There's a lot of people that are losing their jobs for saying and speaking out on some of these things. There's a lot of archaeologists that have spoken out on some of these things that have lost their funding. These major excavations or these major projects are all funded by the Smithsonian. They're all funded by government institutions or the like. So that's you screening all your information about the world around you. So yeah, John and I had some different beliefs maybe on how these things worked out. You know, John believes a lot of this has to do with a money structure, basically controls, restricts and controls resources and thus controls humanity, which is true. I think that a lot of the things that he's saying are true. I think that you just got to take it a step further. That step is people call it spiritual and all that, but it's just the unseen. It's the stuff that's the unseen stuff. It's the kind of like, you know, where you got these magicians. A lot of people are like, oh, it's not magic, it's an illusion. It's the sleight of hand. Once again, there is sleight of hand. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool stuff. And then there is also real magic, where it's not really sleight of hand, but it's something other, and it's something that a lot of people don't understand. So that's what we're dealing with when we're talking about our history. It's been sleight of handed from us, and it's been compartmentalized. Just like everything else that deals with humanity's larger picture, to keep you ensnared or really set you free. It's like it's like Jesus said, the truth shall set you free. I think that's it. I think we're good.